Right now, 4 billion people share one obsession. Not the internet, not religion, not any political idea. Soccer. Every 4 years, the World Cup pulls in more viewers than any other event on Earth. The 2022 Qatar final alone drew 1.5 billion viewers in a single day. That's 1 in 5 humans alive on the planet, all watching the same game. Most people think the answer is obvious. It's cheap. All you need is a ball. That's true, but it's not the whole story, because plenty of cheap sports exist, and none of them come close. The real answer runs much deeper, through history, psychology, and something wired into the human brain itself. Let's start with the ball, because the ball is the reason any of this was possible. Humans have been kicking around objects for over 3,000 years. In China, around 200 BCE, a game called Cuju was played by soldiers as military training. It spread to the royal courts. Emperor Taizong played it himself. In ancient Greece and Rome, a similar game called episkairos involved teams, a ball, and a boundary line. The Aztecs played a ball game called tlachtli as far back as 1400 CE. Every major civilization independently invented a version of kicking a ball. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. In medieval England, entire villages played mob football. No rules, no referees, hundreds of players. Games could last all day and span miles between two towns. King Edward II actually banned it in 1314, calling it a public nuisance. People played anyway. Then, in 1863, something changed everything. On October 26th, representatives from 12 London clubs met at the Freemasons Tavern. They wrote down 17 rules. They called their organization the Football Association. Those 17 rules are the direct ancestor of the game played in 211 countries today. FIFA, founded in 1904, now has more member nations than the United Nations. Let that sink in. A soccer organization is more globally represented than the world's political body. But rules alone don't make a sport dominate a planet. Here's what actually happened next. Britain became the first industrial superpower in human history. British sailors, engineers, merchants, and soldiers spread to every corner of the globe. They brought their language, their customs, and their football. In Brazil in the 1890s, a young man named Charles Miller returned from school in Southampton carrying 2 footballs in his luggage. Brazil went on to win the World Cup 5 times, more than any other nation. A similar story played out in Argentina, Uruguay, India, Egypt, and Japan. Colonial networks planted the game. Local cultures made it their own, and once it took root, it never left. Now here's the part that goes deeper than history. Researchers who study sports psychology have identified something they call the low barrier, high complexity paradox. It means that the best games in the world are easy to start playing and nearly impossible to fully master. Soccer scores perfectly on both dimensions. Any flat surface, any round object. 2 piles of rocks for goals. You can play it in a favela in Rio, on a beach in Senegal, or in a parking lot in Detroit. No equipment beyond a ball, no court, no net required, no score clock. Compare that to cricket, which requires specialized bats, pads, wickets, and a prepared pitch. Or American football, which requires helmets, shoulder pads, and a very specific field. Soccer's genius is that it scales. 2 players or 22, 5 minutes or 90. In 1999, sports economists Stefan Szymanski and Andrew Zimbalist published research showing that soccer's global reach directly correlates with its low equipment cost. In the world's poorest countries, soccer participation rates are often higher than in wealthy nations, because when a ball made of plastic bags works just as well as one that costs $50, the sport belongs to everyone. That's the access argument. But there's a second force at work, and it lives in your brain. Soccer produces low scores. Most professional matches end 1-0 or 1-1. And for decades, American sports fans mocked this. Nothing happens, they said, but they were wrong, completely. In 2014, neuroscientist Sander van der Linden at Princeton published research on uncertainty and emotional engagement. His finding, the human brain releases dopamine not when things go well, but when the outcome is uncertain. In a 1-0 game with 20 minutes left, every second is uncertainty. In a 42-7 American football blowout, the uncertainty is gone by halftime. Soccer's low scoring doesn't make it boring. It makes it neurologically addictive. There's a named concept in sports psychology called compressed tension. It means that when goals are rare, each one carries explosive emotional weight. A goal in soccer is the rarest scoring event in major team sports worldwide, and scarcity creates value. You know this. Now add the identity layer. This is where it gets genuinely strange. In 2012, psychologist Daniel Wan at Murray State University reviewed over 20 years of research on sports fandom. His conclusion: fans who strongly identify with a team show measurable increases in self-esteem when that team wins. Psychologists call this burgeoning, basking in reflected glory. When your team wins, your brain processes it partly as if you won. Soccer, more than any other sport, weaponizes this effect because the entire nation fields one team. Not a city team, not a franchise. The national team. When Brazil plays Germany, 200 million Brazilians are invested in a single outcome. That's a scale of collective identity no other sport can match. And that national identity piece is what turns a game into a cultural institution. There's one more layer almost nobody talks about: the economics. The global soccer industry was worth $600 billion in 2023, according to PwC. The English Premier League alone generates over $7 billion in annual revenue. In 2023, the Saudi Pro League signed Cristiano Ronaldo for an estimated $200 million per year. Money flows where attention goes, and 4 billion eyeballs attract extraordinary money. But the money also creates a feedback loop that makes the sport nearly impossible to dislodge. More fans means more broadcast revenue. More revenue means better players. Better players mean more fans. This is why no sport has ever successfully overtaken soccer's global position. Not cricket, which dominates South Asia but barely registers elsewhere. Not basketball, despite the NBA's aggressive global expansion starting in the 1990s. Soccer's network effects are 160 years old. You cannot replicate that. Now, here's something remarkable that emerged from the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. Researchers from the University of Cape Town tracked social cohesion data across 32 participating nations during the tournament. In every single country, reported levels of community belonging spiked during the tournament and dropped afterward. Not just in winning countries, in losing ones too. The act of watching together, caring together, losing together. That is the mechanism. Sociologists have a term for this. They call it collective effervescence. It was coined by French sociologist Émile Durkheim in 1912 to describe the shared emotional electricity of group rituals. Soccer is one of the most reliable delivery mechanisms for collective effervescence on Earth. It replaces the function once filled by religious ritual, war celebration, and harvest festivals. That is not a small thing. That is a fundamental human need being met by a game. Think about what you feel when you watch your national team in a major tournament. The tension before a penalty shootout, the absolute silence before the kick. Your heart rate actually changes. Multiple studies confirm it. In 2008, a team of cardiologists in Germany monitored 4,279 people during World Cup matches. During Germany's knockout round matches, cardiac emergencies in the surrounding area tripled. The game was literally stopping hearts. No other cultural event in human history produces physiological responses at that scale. So what does all of this add up to? Soccer didn't become the world's sport by accident. It became the world's sport by being the most perfectly designed game for the human animal. It costs nothing to start. It can be played everywhere. It is simple to learn and impossible to perfect. Its scarcity of scoring keeps your brain in chemical suspense for 90 straight minutes. Its national team structure turns individual matches into referendums on identity and belonging. And its network effects, built over 160 years, are now self-sustaining on a planetary scale. It was built by colonialism, spread by industrialization, and kept alive by something much older, the human need to belong. You can trace a direct line from 2 Chinese soldiers kicking a leather ball in 200 BCE to 1.5 billion people watching a final in Qatar. That is the longest continuously running shared human behavior on Earth. And tonight, somewhere on Earth, someone is playing it right now with whatever they can find. Not because someone told them to, not because there's a prize, because it's wired into us. The kicking, the chasing, the scoring, these tap something ancient and universal. Soccer didn't conquer the world. The world recognized itself in soccer. And that is why no matter how much money, marketing, or political power gets thrown at replacing it, nothing ever will. The game is already inside you.